I went from a waist size of 31 inches to 28 inches. Hi lovelies, you're welcome back to the channel. Today I'll be sharing with you all the detailed process on how to go about the sewing of this beautiful corset bustier blouse which I'm putting on right here. This tutorial is a 100% beginners friendly tutorial and there is nothing to regret about it. If this sounds like something you're really interested in learning how to do, please continue watching and don't also skip any part of this tutorial because that might be the most important part. With the 100% perfect fit you see right here, starting from the under bust contour to the snatch I have on the waist, there is no need for long talk or wait. So if this sounds like something you're interested in learning how to do, please kindly do subscribe and continue watching, and let's just get started. To achieve the perfect fit which you saw on me at the beginning part of this tutorial, there are extra measurements that need to be taken on our body parts aside the regular and the normal measurements we normally take. So this is what I shared in the first part of this tutorial, which was the drafting part. So basically this is the second part of this tutorial where I'll be sharing with you all the detailed process on how to assemble all of these drafted pieces together from the body measurements which I took, and I showed you all to the drafting and to the cutting. So if you haven't watched the first part of this tutorial, which you can see the detailed drafting which we did right here, you can as well go to the comment section because the link to the tutorial will be pasted right there. So trust me, there's nothing to regret about that. And if you actually watched the first part of the tutorial, you are safe and okay and good to watch this particular one. But if you are yet to, I'd advise you go ahead and watch it so that you understand every steps we'll be taking right here in today's tutorial. So when I was done drafting and all of that, I went ahead to cut out on my fabric. So as you can see, we also went ahead to label and to also make our arrows. So we went ahead now to cut out on my actual fabric, and I'm using this black fabric. So after cutting, I also added my stitching and my joining allowance all around this piece, which I'll also be measuring so you all can take note of that. So I cut out on my lining piece, my hairstay, and also on my main fabric. So following the arrows that I indicated earlier, that is the same way I did that. So for this part where I'll be joining, I added 1-inch stitching our joining allowance. So here is my center back and also my side back. I did the same thing. So for the sides, you know, the sides that will be joined to the back, I added just 1/2 inch, all right. But for these parts which will be joined to each other, I added 1 inch. So for the center back on the straight parts, I also added 1/2 inch. Then for the top parts, I also added 1/2 inch on all of these pieces, all right. So now before I go ahead to remove my paper from my fabric, I have to go ahead to notch the upper parts, especially for the back part, because when I remove this my pattern paper, I'm going to get confused. So with the help of these notches, I'll be able to indicate the upper part and also the parts that are meant to be joined to each other, which is the arrow that is indicating that, which I went ahead to do, especially for the back part. So having done that, the front parts, notching the front part is not too necessary, okay. So I'll just go ahead and unpin my paper from my fabric for the front part. So here is my center front, which I flipped now to the wrong side facing the camera. So I placed my hairstay, which I already cut out, on my fabric and my lining. So I'm going to make sure I iron this properly. I'll iron this hairstay to all of these my pieces because I cut out my hairstay 4 pieces for each part for ironing. We'll iron to our lining piece and to our fabric. So now you can see what we have right here. I believe you all are familiar with a hairstay, but if you are not, please, the rough part is the part that comes to your fabric, okay. So having done this now, I'm going ahead to separate my actual fabric from my lining piece. So if you have excesses around your fabric, just go ahead and cut it off, I mean from the hairstay, okay. So I'm going to keep all the lining piece aside so that I can start working on my actual fabric. So now I've arranged the side front and also the center front of this my dress. So I'll go ahead now to start joining. So you just get your right sides facing each other, I mean your fabric, and you are going to start joining on that part where we add our 1 inch for our joining, okay. So you just have to start pinning from the base upward, all right. So right sides facing each other, you're going to start joining your center front and your side front. Okay, so after pinning, I'll go ahead now to mark that 1 inch stitching allowance or joining allowance which I gave this while I was cutting on my fabric. So I went ahead now following the shape and the way it went. So while you are going to stitch, when you get to this copper, don't make it too pointy. Okay, just carefully stitch it to be curved and not pointy. All right, so when you pin for one side, also go ahead and do it for the other side. So now for the back part of our blouse, you can see I also iron my stay to the back part. So with the help of the notches I made earlier, I'm able to differentiate the upper part from the lower part because they all look alike, and also for my center back. So this is the essence, and also with the notch I made on the side or on the waistline. So it's very important for you to make notches for proper identification. Okay, so now you get those parts where we left the 1 inch allowance, you place them right sides facing each other and pin just the same way I've done right here. Mark the 1 inch joining allowance which was given initially just as I'm doing right here, and you go ahead and stitch. Okay, so I believe it's very clear and you can understand what I'm doing. So do it for the both sides, and everything you do for your fabric, you're going to do it for your lining. So right here now is this piece of fabric I have. I cut this out on fold, and this is the wrong side. So in length is 13 inches long, and in width is 9.5 inches wide. So for you to cut out this, it's called a modesty panel. Measure out the length of your center back and subtract about 1.5 inches from there, and cut out this fabric on fold. So the wideness should be like from 9 inches upward. All right, so stitch all around and leave a little space where you turn over from. So is that modesty panel is totally optional. If you want your back to show, is okay. It's all about your preference and choice. So you can see now that I've joined my lining piece. This is my lining piece the same way I joined the front part, sorry, my actual fabric. Okay, so whatever you do to your fabric, also repeat the same thing for your lining piece. So all these joints and all this seam we have right here will be ironed open. Everything you see right here will be ironed open, both for the lining piece and our actual fabric. So remember I said whatever you do for your lining piece, you do the same thing for your fabric, but to an extent. Okay, so we'll still get there. So iron all of this piece joint, sorry, open. Okay, so now I've gone ahead to do that. And while ironing on your copper, please use your tailor's ham to do that. Okay, so it doesn't get too flat. So now I've done this, and you can see what I have right here. So there was something I actually did on my actual fabric. Okay, so when I ironed this open, right, I marked half of an inch away from the joints I have, and I ran a very straight stitch there. So you have to measure the size of your boning, and mine is like 3 lines of my tape. So these are like boning channels I've created, okay, for my bone. So from the parts where I had my joints, I marked half of an inch away, and I stitched on my fabric flat. Okay, so it's very obvious and clear right here. So when you must have stitched or your boning case, from the top part, come down by about 3/4 of an inch and close up that part, so it's when you fix your boning, it will stop right there. Okay, then for your under bust, remember that we went up from our waist line or our half line by 5 3/4. For me, it's varies, so that's how to get your under bust. So for that part now, I'm meant to create an extra boning channel, because by the time you fix your eyelet and you're trying to snatch, if you don't fix your boning right there, your fabric is going to tear, like it will come off. So we need to create an extra boning channel there. So I have this long piece that is 1 inch wide, so you place it on the wrong side of your fabric, very close to that edge right there. So you make your first stitch. When you make your first stitch, you go ahead and fold this twice, and you also stitch again. So make sure that you stitch for it to be able to accommodate your boning. That's just the main thing right there. And also make sure you leave a little space there for joining to your lining piece. So right now we're actually fixing an already made bra cup to this our blouse. So you have to get the wrong side of this your cup. So from the middle, you are going to stitch down up to like half of an inch, all right. But if you're in a bigger bust size, you can use 3/4 of an inch. But I think half of an inch is 100% okay for all bust sizes, okay. So more like when you are taking in your darts, so that's how you do it to get this pointy effect on your cup, okay. So now, having done all of this and creating that extra burning channels at the both ends at the back of this my dress, and please, I forgot to tell you all that you also join the sides of your blouse, please, using that half of an inch. Then the joints is 1 inch, please, I forgot this initially. So now I'm going to fix this my bra cup to my dress. So you have to make sure that the point that is curved on your fabric or on your blouse, you actually fix your cup, the pointy part of your cup, inside that part, okay. Let me take this again. You are going to get the puffy part on your fabric and fix the pointy part of your cup to it. So make sure that this dart is like at the center of that joint which you have. So arrange this properly before you go ahead to pin. So we are going to tack this. Actually, most people make use of a hemming gum to iron their bra cup to their fabric, but I prefer tacking, okay. So I went ahead to pin first. So when I pinned, it wasn't okay, it wasn't sitting properly. Left for you alone, you know. So I had to unpin this again to pin again. You still see it here. So when you pin on the wrong side, turn it over to the right side. So you can see mine is not looking good at all on my first attempt. So I went ahead to also remove this pin and pin again. So that is to show you that we all make mistakes and nobody is perfect, but you just have to try your best to get it right, okay. So when I must have arranged this properly, I went ahead to pin first before tacking. So when I was okay now with the outcome, you see what I have. So now I'm going ahead now to get my needle and my black thread. So you are going to tag this with that allowance you have left, not on your fabric. It's not meant to be visible at all on the right side of your fabric. So you see that allowance which I ironed open, that remaining allowance there, that is where I am actually tacking this together with my bra cup. So you can see it's very clear here. So when you tack for this part, you are actually going to cut it off and tie it to secure that part. So you also do it for the other side of your bra cup. This same bra cup I'm working with right here, so I'll also tag the side as well.
Across the room, damn, what a hell of a view. I feel good, you look great, I like you.
So you see, for the other part of the allowance too, that is what I'm also tacking to my bra cup. You're not meant to do this to show on the right side of your fabric. Please do have that in mind. So when you tack the upper part, also do the same thing for the lower part, and you do the same thing for the other bra cup, okay. So using the same method, you do it at the lower part where you have your darts intake. So I've gone ahead to do this for the both parts of my cup, and at both sides on this my bra cup. See, I tacked it at that center right there. Before you tack, make sure that it's on that part where you have your deep sweetheart neckline from, all right. So now this is what it looks like at the right side, so you can see. And after that, now the next thing is to join this our fabric to our lining piece. So that was the reason I told you all to leave about half an inch at the sides for stitching. So I've stitched this my modesty panel to my lining. That's where you're meant to stitch it. So you just have to stitch it at that last joint we have at the back of our dress, just right there, okay. So when you flip it, it will come out nice. So keep it on top of your lining piece when you're about to join it to your main fabric. I mean, your modesty panel should be on top of your lining piece when you're about joining your lining and your fabric, okay. It's not meant to be inside, it's meant to be on top of your lining, that is on the right side. So I went ahead now to bring the back parts or the center back of my lining piece and that of my actual fabric. Now I'm pinning. So with that little space I have, I'm going to pin. So I pinned the back. So when I pinned, I went ahead to arrange the top part of my blouse to ensure that it aligns, both the joining allowance, everything aligned perfectly. So I only stitched the sides. Remember that we'll be piping the the upper part and the lower part. Okay, we are not turning it up right here, but I want you all to see that after joining the sides, you can see my modesty panel is outside. So that is how it's meant to be. All right, so the next thing now for me is to cut out my boning piece so that I can fix my boning to this my boning channels I've created already. So I'm using this non-sewable boning. So you measure out the length of your boning channel, I mean the length. So whatever you have to subtract 1 inch from it. So when I measured this first boning channel I had about 13.5 inches, but when I was cutting out, I cut out 12.5 inches, or some people even reduce theirs by 1.5 inches, but I do reduce mine with just 1 inch. Okay, so that it doesn't get to the upper parts and also to the base, so that you can feel comfortable and you don't get injured at the end of the day. So I also use a masking tape to secure the upper parts where my boning will be in case of anything. All right, so that is basically it. I've cut out this boning. Now I'm going to start passing them through those channels which I have created already. As you can see, I'm doing right here. So that first boning channel was quite tight for my boning because of there was not enough space at that back there, because normally I do create 2 boning channels most of the time for that back part, but because I didn't have enough allowance, I had to just create 1 boning channel. Okay, so I kept forcing this until it got to the end and everything went inside. So you can see that I'm also fixing this my masking tape on my bonings. I did it for all the bones which I added to or fixed to this dress, but you're not meant to fix a boning to your lining piece. All right, so when you get to your under bust, you also do the same thing. All right, your bone should stop exactly on the other bust. It has no business getting up to your bust area. Okay, just exactly on the other bust. It should even be 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch below your under bust. All right, and 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch above your top length. So this is the pattern and the way it's done. So mark out what you have, measure out what you have as the length of your boning channels, and subtract 1 inch from there. I believe it's very clear. So I did this for all of this piece aside the lining. Okay, so when I was done doing this, I realized that we didn't create an extra boning channel at the side of our bust. This will help to cage your bust. It's very, very important. So at the side, just very close to your cup, you can see before the joints we have for the front and the back, that is where you're supposed to create an extra channel. So I place my ruler there. I'm going to use my marker now to mark it out so that you don't get confused. Honestly, it skipped my mind, but thank God I wasn't entirely done. So you see, we're going to cut out a piece and do this at the both sides just before the joints you have for the front part and the back part of your blouse. All right, so please make sure you create your boning channels. All right, it helps to gauge your bust area. It really helps a lot. So when I went ahead to do that and also fix all my boning, I also went ahead to iron this my boning, because you don't need to leave it that pointy and curved and strong. It has to be straight. So when you're ironing, place your hot iron on top of it before you now go ahead to iron this. You don't just give this a light ironing. You can even keep a thick towel on top of your fabric on your iron and place it on top and press it on top for your bones to be straight. Okay, so this is what I have when I was done. So stitch your lining and your fabric together at that upper part, so on the right side actually. So this piece I have right here now will be for my piping. So I'm going to pipe the upper part of this our blouse. All right, so you can see that our modesty panel is like 1/2 inch below the top part of our blouse. So that's what it's meant to be. Then the right side of this piece I have for my piping will be on my lining piece. So I'm going to pin it following the shape of how that my neckline went from the back all the way to the other side of the back part of this my blouse. So I'll continue pinning. Then when I get to the very end, I'll flip this my piece for my piping to the front on the right side of my fabric.
Behave just so you notice too. Sneaking looks up and down from across.
So this my piece was quite short. I had to join it at some point. Okay, so you see it was short. I had to join it when I was now stitching on my sewing machine. So now that is something you can do on your own, right? After pinning, make a straight stitch. After stitching, you now flip this to the right side of your fabric, fold this in twice to get rid of those rough edges, and now make your second stitch. So guys, I've gone ahead to do this right now so you can see what I have. We're already getting to the end of this tutorial, almost. So this is what it looks like on the wrong side. You can see how neat it's looking. So I'm just going to go ahead and carefully iron these pipings I have because it's kind of rumpled. Okay, so I'm yet to pipe for the base of our blouse. All right, so after everything, I will go ahead now to pin. So you are meant to arrange this properly. Make sure that all your joints you have align with your fabric and your lining. Okay, so make sure that they align. So you can see that I went ahead now to arrange mine, making sure that all the joints and the sides everywhere aligns properly. Okay, so at this point my lining was a bit longer than my fabric, which I have no cause for alarm. I just went ahead to trim it off. So you can see that I'm just taking my time to arrange this and also pin. Okay, so by the time you are done, you now go ahead and stitch this together before you go ahead to pipe, because if you don't stitch it together before piping, you might not like the outcome at the end of the day. So to have a very neat finishing and a neat stitch, go ahead and do that. Okay, so after that, now you have to mark your eyelets. So from the top part, after that, exactly from that part I piped, I'll come down by ½ inch. Then the spaces I want in between, I usually use is 1.5. Some use 1 inch, some use 1¼ but I normally use 1.5. So when you're now done with all of this, you're going to achieve exactly what I had, which I showed you at the beginning part of this tutorial, which is also similar to that of this thumbnail. So I fixed my eyelets. It actually has a silver eyelet and a gold one, so I made use of the silver one. So cut out your bias strip for your lacing and iron this out properly. Thank you so much for watching. If you've come this far, you've not yet subscribed, please kindly do so. I'll see you all in my next one. Have a nice time ahead of you all. Bye.